Hello, and thank you for listening to and watching my talk. My name is Melina Pereira Savi, and I'm a postdoctoral fellow at the postgraduate program in English at the Federal University of Santa Catarina in Brazil. The title of my talk is The Commons and the Pool of Objects in the Anthropocene in Ruth Ozeki's The Book of Form and Emptiness. The novel The Book of Form and Emptiness is Ruth Ozeki's most recent one. Published in 2021, it focuses on Benny, a teenager, and Annabelle, his mother, as they traverse a period of bereavement and face the challenges of having to cope with their own issues while trying to support one another in a world that is, in a sense, ending. The narrators of the novel are the book itself, capital letters, and Benny. Benny is ours and the book's interlocutor, and with the letter, the book steers the narrative in different directions. Right at the start of the novel, the reader is informed that objects speak, and some people can hear them. After Kenji, Benny's father, passes, and in a silly way run over by a delivery truck while sleeping on the street where he lived, drunk and high, Benny begins to hear voices and objects start speaking to him. In the opening of the novel, Benny is speaking with us, the reader. He wants us to hear how the book, his best friend, is speaking to us. And he is wondering whether we too hear objects, the needy objects that surround us. It's a matter of having one's ears tuned to hear, and most of us don't. While we might resort to our labeling impulses and attempt to find a name for Benny's capabilities, such as schizophrenia or psychosis, it seems that Ozeki is inviting us to explore what objects would say were we to hear them in a language we recognize as our own. Benny manages to hold his hearing faculties under the radar for a while at home and suffers greatly for it because the pull of things is extremely loud. As the book says, when things were talking, it was almost impossible to pay attention to anything else. At 14 years of age in school, where there was nowhere to hide, hearing things becomes more problematic. One day, a bird crashed against the classroom window and died. The window began to cry and vibrate. It felt guilty. In trying to make the window stop, Benny starts banging on it. Given this socially unacceptable behavior, he's taken to the principal, Miss Mooney, and explains that the window didn't mean to kill the bird. This is the first time Benny tries to speak for an object, and he says that it used to be sand. It remembers being sand. It remembers the birds, the way their feet felt walking, making little tracks. It never wanted to be sneakily transparent. It likes birds, likes watching them from the window, so it was crying. I shouldn't have hit it, but I needed it to stop. Flagged by the event, the principal refers Benny to the school psychologist. He starts taking medication, Ritalin, and is later referred to a psychiatric hospital where he manages not to control the voices, but to pretend he isn't hearing them. There he meets a girl who calls herself the Aleph, after Borges' story. With artistic impulses, he passes little notes with activities around the place, stirring a commotion among the patients. The notes, which sound like Zen koans, say things such as, put your shoe on the table, ask what it wants from you. Say good morning to the toilet, thank it for taking all your shit, and come to the library, which Benny eventually does. In an interview with Ezra Klein for the New York Times, Ozeki lays out some of the influences for the novel, one of them being Jane Bennett's articulations on the notion of vibrant matter, which are organized in the book Vibrant Matter, A Political Ecology of Things, published in 2010, and the other influence being the Buddhist concept of emptiness. I'll start with Bennett. She lays out a theory in which objects' agential qualities are at the forefront of our understanding of how the world works. She calls this a philosophical project, one of countering the idea, and I quote, of matter as passive stuff, as raw, brute, or inert. Vital materiality is her claim on the world of things, and she includes everything under this nomenclature: a thunder, gloves, rats. Bennett's guiding question in this exploration on vital materiality, which is equally useful for exploring Ozeki's novel, is as follows. How would political responses to public problems change were we to take seriously the vitality of non-human bodies, with non-human in parentheses? The vitality of non-human bodies, of course, is a political project as much as the one that considers non-human things as inert. Only the former seems to be a more accurate portrayal of the world, while the latter allows for the instrumentalization of matter for the benefit, necessarily in scare quotes, of humans, a benefit that at the end of the day works to our own detriment. In the face of anthropogenic effects on the biosphere, among which are climate change, land use, pollution, ocean acidification, among others, the political project of holding non-human things as inert and devoid of will, agency, and purpose will most likely be the end of us. In fact, on chapter 6, Benny attempts to explain how things speak to him. He uses the word volition, which means will, and is similar to Spinoza's conatus, which is from where Bennett begins developing her vibrant matter philosophical and political project, which considers things in assemblages, a term she borrows from Deleuze and Guattari, to explain how things work in groups, and never in isolation, and their volitions change according to the groups they are assembled in. Benny explains how things strive to explain themselves, communicate with him, and even with us in how things go wrong, get lost, and resist our will to act upon them. He also makes a distinction between things made and things unmade, meaning things that carry the human intent that manipulated them into an object in the case of the former, and things that are in their natural state in the latter. Concerned about whether he manages to be clear on what he is trying to explain to us, he asks the book to take over the explanation, and it turns into a rant by the made things targeted to us, their makers. The book argues, and I quote, "In the beginning, before there was life, when the world of things was the entire world, everything mattered. Then life happened, and eventually you people came along with your big, beautiful, bisected brains and clever opposable thumbs. You couldn't help yourselves, and it was only a matter of time before you caused a rift to occur, dividing matter into two camps, the made and the unmade. Cranked by the power of your big prefrontal cortices, the engines of your imagination gathered steam until, in tumultuous leaps of what you came to call progress, the made proliferated, relegating the unmade to the status of mere resource, a lowly serf class to be colonized, exploited, and fashioned into something else, something that was more to your liking." The book is alerting the reader to the revolution that is currently taking place among the made matter, which has believed in the narrative of its superiority over the unmade. Aware of its misunderstanding, the made calls this distinction between the made and the unmade false dichotomies and hegemonic hierarchies of materialist colonizers. That's us. In the Book of Form and Emptiness, Benny hears the plight of objects. Fridge word magnets want to be moved around, windows miss being sand, shoes want to be worn, stuffed animals suffer with what they hear in the pediatric psychology office, and books want to be read. After Benny's first institutionalization, he decides to spend his summer holidays in the library and, after the break ends, to skip school altogether. He forges a doctor's report and creates a fake email account for his mother, through which he sends the report to the school's principal. But Benny doesn't skip school to engage in activities that might be considered detrimental to him. Instead, he goes to the public library, where he reads, explores, makes friends, and listens to the books and to the pull of the last public bindery in North America. As a communal and intellectually engaging place, the library proves to be the welcoming environment that neither his house, where his mother has developed hoarding habits, or school, where he is ostracized, managed to be. The library, on the other hand, teems with possibility. It is the emptiness in the title, as I will argue further. There, Benny is surrounded by books, by a resilient structure, clean, object-free nooks, familiar faces, safety, and ultimately friends, both human and non-human. The Aleph also frequents the public library, along with her hobo friend, Slavoj, an older Eastern European poet who is also known as the Bottle Man, and who is, as he says, writing an epic poem, his humble attempt to versify the planet. Both Slavoj and the Aleph are philosophically inclined, and they too feel, in their way, the pull of objects. Slavoj ponders humanity's troubled relationship with the environment through poetry. His epic poem is called Earth, while the Aleph produces little snow globes with narratives contained. Instead of delightful sceneries, her globes tell stories of human-made catastrophes, climate change, precarity, where the coral is bleached, the apocalypse is contained. Nuclear winter, a tiny devastated world, as Benny puts it. The Aleph's and Slavoj's world is already one of the Anthropocene. For Benny, whose sheltered world has been ending in a ways ever since his father died, and he has been learning about climate change in school, it is becoming one of the Anthropocene. As well as for Annabelle, who had always wanted to be a librarian, but ended up having to abandon school to start work. Working as a news clipper, she has been helplessly reading all about man-made disasters for years, which only adds to the sense of doom her life has gained ever since Kenji died. The space of the public library is one of mystery and magic. Annabelle recalls how there were stories about the recent acquisition section of the library, where books refused to stay on the shelves, for instance, and how there were so-called paranormal locations, where lost things showed up, toilets flushed on their own, and people claimed to feel like they were being watched. The most magical place in the library, however, is the bindery, where books are repaired, bound, and rehabilitated for the library's patrons. The bindery, as Slavoj remarks, is where everything is possible, a sentence that echoes through the novel in the lips of different characters. The bindery is where things are before the event of co-arising, which I will explore now. In the novel, the Buddhist concept of emptiness is explained by Icon in the book Tidy Magic, a book within a book which jumps into Annabelle's shopping cart one day at an art supply shop. It is a book wanting to be read and identifying a reader in need. Icon explains that in Zen Buddhism, emptiness is also known as co-arising, interbeing, interconnectedness. Emptiness is also often understood as the idea that things do not have inherent qualities in themselves, but are the result of encounters, thus the term co-arising or dependent origination. And the relevant implication is that every individual thing, which is in itself a utopian condition, is full of potential before any given encounter with any other thing, non-human or human. The notion that no one thing has inherent and wholesome qualities in themselves, but are necessarily the result of the assemblages they are part of, is what makes the bindery such a powerful space in the library. Towards the end of the novel, Benny has a transcendental experience in the bindery, an experience that, in the Buddhist context, might be described as enlightenment, the wisdom of seeing the world as pure potential, unfixed, unbound by any one interaction. Following the results of a presidential election, the novel hints at Trump's victory. Benny leaves the house and, unwillingly, joins a protest march, which turns out violent. The entire march is energetic, with protest cries for climate change awareness, democratic rights, and peace. And Benny, caught up with the emotional charge of the march, ends up hitting a car with a bat, under the influence of a couple of misfit acquaintances who hang around a park near his house. Once the police tries to control the march gone awry, Benny escapes into the library in a state of torpor. He settles down until everyone leaves the building and goes into the bindery. It is the book that explains what takes place in the bindery, always using the pronouns us and we, suggesting that it is a shared experience. What they saw in the bindery was the universe unbound, all the stories that have and have not been told, all the flux of matter becoming other matter, visions of the voices of the things that called for Benny's attention. To explain how they could have seen that, the book says that, in the bindery, where phenomena is still unbound, stories have not yet learned to behave in a linear fashion, and all the myriad things of the world are simultaneously emergent, occurring at the same present moment. adding that in this unbound state that night, you encountered all there was and never could be, form and emptiness, and the absence of form and emptiness, making a direct reference to the Buddhist Heart Sutra, where the Bodhisattva Avalokitesvara expounds the nature of reality, of the inherent potential of all things before being temporarily bound by assemblages. Benny is found by Corey, Annabelle's friend who works at the library. He is sitting on a paper cutter while the blade looms over his head. After this experience, Benny becomes catatonic and has to be institutionalized again. Annabelle is running the risk of losing Benny's guardianship since she has turned their home into a hoarder's den. Within the communal space of the library, a team is forged by Corey, who invites the Aleph, Slajov, and others to help Annabelle clean her home in time for the visit from the social services. Up until part 5, the last part and pages of the novel, Benny divides the narrative powers with the book. He is negotiating the story with the book, and once in a while speaks to the reader so as to explain himself in an unassuming way. On part 5, Benny takes over, his authoritative voice sounding new to the reader. Stuck inside his mind after the bindery event, unable to physically move or speak in response to his mother and the Aleph who visit him in the children's psychiatric ward, he comes to understand the urgency of taking control over his voice, his body, and his story. In doing so, he takes control of the narrative. In a sense, Benny accepts all of what he has become and the tensions among things, a quality which is inherent to how the world works in assemblages. As Lavoj professes to youngsters who live at the abandoned warehouse where he himself lives, we are not separate. We are our planet, and we must love it completely. We must love our garbage, our pollution, our trash. We must love our trans-earth, our trans-planet, and all its mutable distress. In the communal space of the library, Benny finds space for all the cries of the world to coexist, his own included. There are so many layers in this 400-plus pages novel that selecting one or two of them makes me wonder whether, in light of Bennett's articulations on vibrant matter, I myself am being fair with the book, capital letter, which actually poses the reader the following question. Has it ever occurred to you that books have feelings too? I guess we, the readers, have pondered that and understand the whole of things as imbued with volition. We hear the cries of the novels that want to be read, the will of things to be part of, or resist the assemblages we are responsible for. In that sense, retrieving Bennett's question, how would political responses to public problems change were we to take seriously the vitality of non-human bodies? We might begin to answer it, imagining the best possible way to engage with non-human things, having their best intentions in mind and not simply our own. Thank you.